There were freed slaves who moved there. Now, to be fair, we moved them all off in the 1960s. Many of them came here. Some of them went to Mauritius, where I gather they weren't treated very well.
Who's now back at the core of number 10. But I think there are big questions around it. The most important thing, if Keir Starmer's sitting there, I don't think his friendship with Philippe Sands, who has been representing the Mauritian government.
So I think this is a sort of almost a sort of knee-jerk anti-imperialist sort of thing, following this ruling from the International Court of Justice in The Hague.
And again, so he's sensitive to it, but I don't think that is the issue. I think the issue is his, as it were, legalist background on the one hand versus the overwhelming need from his point of view to get on relatively well with the Trump administration.
Picture this, a late night call from the White House, Trump's voice booming through the speaker. Keir, what the hell are you doing? Starmer, phone in hand, weighs the fate of nations. This isn't fiction, it's the reality Keir Starmer faces as he navigates the Chagos Islands deal. With each passing day, the pressure mounts. Will he crack or stand his ground? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. Keir Starmer's bold move over the Chagos Islands has thrust him into a high-stakes game of diplomatic chess with Donald Trump. But why is the Labor leader risking the wrath of the former US president over a handful of tiny islands in the Indian Ocean? The answer lies in the strategic importance of these specks on the map, particularly Diego Garcia, home to a vital UK-US military base. This isn't just about a few remote islands, it's about power, sovereignty, and the future of the UK's place on the world stage. Starmer's commitment to transfer control of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius stands in stark contrast to Trump's security concerns. The US base on Diego Garcia serves as a crucial hub for Western military operations in the Indian Ocean. Any change in its status could have significant geopolitical ramifications, especially given the growing influence of China and Iran in the region.
The Biden administration was relatively relaxed about the deal. The Trump administration, I think quite rightly, a lot more concerned.
Big push from the International Court, of course represented on it are both China and Russia. About the final parts of decolonization. It's an important subject. I can understand the legal issues.
Particularly Marco Rubio, the Florida senator, who's going to be Trump's Secretary of State, Mike Waltz, who's going to be the National Security Advisor. And, of course, Starmer wants to get on with Trump, even after all the things that they've said about him.
Nonetheless, I think if the incoming administration in the US is very against it, it is their airbase. If we are handing it over to a country, Mauritius, which is a very close ally.
Starmer's gambit is a risky one. He's reportedly considering an annual payment of £90 million to retain access to the Diego Garcia base, potentially amounting to a staggering £9 billion over a proposed 100-year lease period. But is this astronomical sum worth the potential fallout with the US? Trump and his allies are unlikely to take kindly to any perceived threat to their strategic interests. The tension between Starmer's vision for post-Brexit sovereignty and US military interests is palpable. Downing Street's statement on the Chagos Islands deal has done little to quell concerns in Washington. Their reference to malign influence echoes previous warnings from Trump's administration about China's presence in the Indian Ocean, but it's clear that Starmer is charting his own course. So what's driving Starmer to take such a risk? Is this about establishing a distinct foreign policy direction separate from previous administrations, or is it political posturing for domestic consumption? The answer likely lies somewhere in between. Starmer seems determined to prove that post-Brexit Britain can stand on its own 2 feet, even if it means defying a powerful ally. But the consequences could be severe. If the deal goes through, it could strain UK-US relations significantly. We're talking about a potential diplomatic rift that could affect everything from trade deals to military cooperation and intelligence sharing. Is Starmer prepared for the fallout? The first payoff of this high-stakes gamble is becoming clear. Increased financial compensation and economic benefits for Mauritius could reflect positively on Starmer's leadership at home. He's positioning himself as a strong leader willing to stand up to international pressure.
He recognizes Trump is the guy. And now it's on hold, and we'll have to see what happens.
increasingly close ally of China in that area. And if, despite the money we've put in already, we're supposed, however hard-pressed we are, to spend another £9 billion of this, I don't understand.
There were concerns that China, there would be nothing to stop China building a military base on one of the neighbouring islands.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the last thing you need, isn't it? So, historically, the Chagos Islands, they've had no indigenous population.
I think they'd sent the Mauritian Justice Minister to London for further talks. This was all negotiated very quickly and, at the time successfully by Jonathan Powell.
But at what cost? As Starmer's Chagos Islands gambit unfolds, a storm is brewing across the Atlantic. Donald Trump, never one to take perceived slights lying down, is reportedly seething. The former US president, known for his America First policy, could unleash a diplomatic tempest that goes far beyond a war of words. What's at stake here isn't just a few remote islands, but the entire framework of UK-US relations. Trump's potential retaliation could be severe and wide-ranging. Trade deals, intelligence sharing, and NATO support are all on the chopping block. The special relationship between the UK and US, long considered unshakable, suddenly looks fragile. Starmer's bold move might play well at home, but at what cost to Britain's international standing? The domestic political fallout for Starmer could be equally disastrous. His decision to defy Trump might cost him the next election. Conservative opponents are already sharpening their knives, ready to paint him as a leader who's willing to sacrifice national security for political posturing. The British public, still grappling with the economic aftershocks of Brexit, might not take kindly to further instability. But how far is Trump willing to go to protect US interests? His track record suggests he won't pull any punches. We could see punitive tariffs slapped on British goods, dealing a blow to the UK's already struggling economy. Possibility of reduced intelligence sharing is even more alarming. In an age of global terrorism and cyber warfare, such a move could leave Britain dangerously exposed. The implications extend far beyond bilateral relations. The Chagos Islands dispute could reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Indian Ocean region. With China's growing influence in the area, this power play might upset the delicate balance of global superpowers.
There were freed slaves who moved there. Now, to be fair, we moved them all off in the 1960s. Many of them came here. Some of them went to Mauritius, where I gather they weren't treated very well.
Who's now back at the core of number 10. But I think there are big questions around it. The most important thing, if Keir Starmer's sitting there, I don't think his friendship with Philippe Sands, who has been representing the Mauritian government.
So I think this is a sort of almost a sort of knee-jerk anti-imperialist sort of thing, following this ruling from the International Court of Justice in The Hague.
And again, so he's sensitive to it, but I don't think that is the issue. I think the issue is his, as it were, legalist background on the one hand versus the overwhelming need from his point of view to get on relatively well with the Trump administration.
Is Starmer inadvertently opening the door for Beijing to increase its foothold in this strategically crucial region? As the clock ticks, Starmer faces an impossible choice. Back down, and he risks being seen as weak, kowtowing to American pressure and betraying his vision for post-Brexit Britain. Stand firm, and he could jeopardize the UK's most important international alliance. The fate of Brexit, the special relationship, and Starmer's own political future hang in the balance. The real shock. This isn't just about Starmer asserting Britain's independence or Trump protecting American interests. It's a high-stakes gamble that could backfire spectacularly, potentially reshaping global alliances and power dynamics. As tensions mount and the diplomatic chess game intensifies, one question looms large. Is Starmer prepared for the fallout if Trump decides to go nuclear? Metaphorically speaking, of course. Keir Starmer finds himself in a political quagmire of his own making. His Chagos Islands gambit has left him teetering on a precarious tightrope, with the fate of Brexit, the special relationship, and his own political future hanging in the balance. Recent polls show a divided British public, with many concerned about the potential fallout from Trump's retaliation. The specter of economic repercussions and strained military ties looms large. As the pressure mounts, Starmer faces an impossible choice. Will he stand his ground, risking Trump's full wrath and potentially jeopardizing Britain's most crucial alliance? Or will he backtrack, appearing weak and betraying his vision for a post-Brexit Britain? The coming days will shape the UK's global standing for years to come. One thing's certain, the world is watching, and Starmer's next move could make or break his political career.